we are now in the stage where we are going to discuss. The COP has to agree on how is the REDD Plus going to be financed and what are the results from REDD Plus that will be financed. So that is the ongoing discussion under the LCA working group, and then under the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice, we are discussing, and this is the body that I'm co-chairing, the working group on REDD under SBSTA. We are talking about how do you establish a national forest monitoring system which will set the baselines on what the state of your forests are. How are you going to monitor the emissions levels that are going to be emitted from the forest or reduced, absorbed by the forest? And then thirdly, how are you going to develop the information system on how you are implementing the safeguards that have been adopted in the Cancun Conference of Parties in 2009. Yeah, so that is where we are, and the expectation is that we will be able to finish these methodological issues so that governments who are implementing REDD can already proceed in establishing their national forest monitoring systems, as well as the reference levels, and also set up their safeguard information systems. But also governments will be able to also receive adequate finance already to be able to do all of these things, no? And to implement the REDD plus goals, which is to decrease emissions from forests, but also to, of course, achieve sustainable development. That's the contentious areas are, of course, in terms of what results are you talking about. Some governments are just saying that the only thing that they are willing to pay for are the carbon emissions that are decreased, no? But the other countries, mainly developing countries, are opting for including also non-carbon benefits like biodiversity conservation, sustainable management of forests, as well as of course, poverty alleviation, because if you're going to use the forest to sequester carbon, that will have an impact on the livelihoods of forest-dependent and forest-dwelling peoples. So that's where we are right now. And since I come from an indigenous peoples organization, the main thing that we are pushing for here is that we would like to really see governments to implement and develop the safeguard information systems, wherein they will make a report by next year of how they have developed these systems that will respect the safeguards agreed upon in Cancun. And these safeguards includes respect for the rights and traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, for good forest governance, conservation of biological diversity, and of course full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in developing REDD Plus mechanisms at the national level.
Is there a concern amongst indigenous peoples and other interested parties that without those safeguards, REDD Plus would just lead, or REDD would just lead to forests becoming factories for wood and storing carbon and then just making money?
Oh, definitely, that's the major concern of indigenous people since the start. And that's precisely why a lot of our colleagues and ourselves have come to participate in these climate change processes, because we wanted to ensure that when forests are carved out to contribute to climate change mitigation, it will not lead towards us being displaced from our forests, as well as it will not lead to the undermining of our traditional livelihoods, which are dependent on the forest. Like there are hunters and gatherers who are still in the forests. There are of course, there's agroforestry that's happening in the forest also, which is done by indigenous peoples. So we want to ensure that those are not going to be totally undermined. We are not going to be prevented from doing that. And thirdly, that our traditional knowledge and traditional systems of managing the forest that has really ensured that there are still forests remaining today are also reinforced and strengthened. So those are our concerns that we wanted to bring here And we were managed to get all of those, at least in the safeguards provisions that have been agreed upon by the parties in Cancun.
And give us an idea from a Philippines perspective how
Okay.
important the forests are to your way of life and to your culture.
Well, in the Philippines, the situation is that most of the remaining forests in the Philippines are actually in indigenous people's territories. No, and this is very important for us because this is, of course, the source of our identities and cultures. That is where a lot of our sacred groves are. And this is also the forests are also providing our livelihoods as well as all the ecosystem services that are not just enjoyed by us, but also by the other communities, no? The water that comes from the forest, the fertility, and of course the contributions in mitigating climate change. So it's so important for indigenous peoples precisely because of those reasons, but also for the whole Filipino population for that matter, because if we don't have those remaining forests, and we are a very high-risk country, you know, we are number 3 in the top 10 countries that are suffering from all kinds of disasters. Forests will have a very big role in terms of helping abate the risks of disasters.